Welcome back, everyone. This is David from DH Trains. Hopefully you guys have checked out some of our older videos on the North Texas Beltline that we've posted. Today we're working on the full-size North Texas Beltline, and this is basically going to end up being about a 140-mile long route. But today we're starting off in Kingston Yard, which, if you know from our layout videos, is our most important divisional yard. And basically today I decided that I wanted to completely rework the yard that I had set up originally. So the first part of this clip, of course, is me just kind of deleting some of the old yard and looking at how I'm going to figure out the planning for the new yard. I had a couple of rules in mind that I needed for the new yard, a couple of ways or techniques, I guess, that I wanted to make sure to include. And I apologize for this cut right here. This is me trying to remember how to cut Turfex out of the ground. It took me a minute, but I finally figured it back out. In case you didn't know, you put it on the Turfex layer and then you use the down elevation tool in order to get rid of your Turfex. So if you didn't know, now you know. But yeah, for the yard that we're working on today, some of the rules is, you know, we're going to have basically two yards kind of in one. The first yard that you're going to see me working on here is what I call the through yard. This is the yard that serves all the traffic that's going to other parts of the layout or the route via through trains. So one of the things here was we had to have our shortest track had to have 4,000 feet, and we were shooting for a long track of around 6,000. And so I had to lengthen these considerably, and you can see it's kind of overlapping other stuff that I had already made before. And then the other rule that we had here was I was going to take it from having just 7 tracks, or 6 tracks. I think I was going to make it have 8 tracks. Plus it's going to have a loop track all the way around. And there were several reasons for this. But the biggest reason just being that after I built the original yard and then started running some test sessions, I just realized there just wasn't enough space at all. And part of the issue is this yard is going to be in 2 sections. One is the through section we're working on right now, and the other section is the local yard, which you'll see me start here in just a little bit. But the local yard serves about 180 car spots in the cities of Greenville and Kingston and in a little town called Merritt. So there's quite a bit of traffic that's going to go through this yard, and whenever those locals come back to the yard and cut their train, you know, you're going to have 4,000 foot trains that need to be broken down. So I needed plenty of yard space in order to be able to store cars going to different parts of the route. When the route's finished, I'm going to have, you know, several different manifest trains and whatnot that go between the different yards on different ends of the route, and as such I needed to make sure there was plenty of space to include these cars as they just get held here. But right now you see me putting in the loop track. Just trying to make sure that my rulers are good, that I've got my distances down like I like. And the loop track does exactly what it says it does. It just allows you to loop past this portion of the yard, and if you're bringing in a train or if you are working the yard goats and you need to move to a different part of the yard, you can use the loop track for that without actually disturbing any switching that's going on in the yard itself. Since you can see that we're putting in the ladder right now, talk for a minute about what these tracks in this through yard are actually doing. Our 2 tracks that are closest to the main, those are the arrival and departure tracks. So that way we can have, you know, 2 tracks available for trains that are coming in or going out. Next up after that, we've got 2 tracks that we're going to use for northbound trains heading up to Paris, Texas, just because there's a lot of traffic that's going to head up that way, plus it's a really long branch, honestly. Then secondly, we've got 2 tracks devoted to trains that are heading southbound to Mineola, where we'll have a interchange with the Union Pacific. And then we have 2 more tracks set aside for trains that are going to be going west over to McKinney, where we have an interchange with the DGNO, which is a short line here in the Dallas area. What I'm doing right now is I realized that I put the wrong track in. I wanted to use some rusty track, so going through here and replacing that using the section tool and whatnot. I hate when the switches do that, where they eliminate the ties. That always becomes a pretty annoying thing to try to fix. All right, here in just a second, you're going to see us slide over and start working on the engine repair facility. Now, since it's just a short line with, only around 25 to 30 locomotives or so for the entire line, I really didn't need a massive, 7-stall engine facility. So I ended up going with this one that only has 2 stalls. I figured, since we'll mostly be working with EMDs and a couple of Dash 9s, I figured really there wouldn't be too much of a need for anything heavier than this. And of course, I could always just say that since I made up the railroad, we can make our own rules, and this is how we decided to spend our money. Right to the side here, you're going to see we start to put in the repair and place facility for rail cars. And that's what you see there is going to be 3 tracks in that little shop. Of course, with some space out in front where cars can be worked on outside of the shop if it's, something real light, like just replacing a wheel set or whatnot. If you've seen any maintenance crews work rip tracks, you know that simple things like switching out wheel sets or minor repairs, those are always done actually outside the shop. There's really no reason for that to be done inside a shop when it's a very small and simple thing that can be done in, an hour or less. In the foreground here, what we're starting to work on now is the engine fueling facility. So I want to throw a couple of JR assets in here to get this all lined out. Plus, I needed to have this switch break off to the left to get to the supply track for that facility. This was a bit of a challenge just because I didn't want my curve radius to be too tight. But now we're, of course, back at the repair and place facility, getting these tracks lined up and making sure I've got something that looks pretty decent. Off to the right, you see a little scrap yard. That's going to move here in a little bit. We're going to talk about the industries here a little bit later. Here in just a minute, we're going to head over on the south end of the layout, or of the yard, and we're going to start working on the local yard. And I have a lot to say about the local yard, so I'm going to go ahead and start talking about that because we're about to head over there in just a minute. Since all the trains serving the local industries are going to be originating in this yard, I needed a separate local yard in order to serve as a holding spot for these locals, because more or less the way I want to run these locals is, we're not going to take a train on a day if there's only, 20 cars that need to be set out. Because if you remember earlier, I said there's 180 car spots in the towns that this yard serves. So, really the whole operation can be done with 3 separate trains. And so if you think around 60 cars each, those aren't too long trains. If you average it out with 50-foot cars, you're looking at 3,000-foot long trains. So my idea behind this local yard was I needed to make sure that I accommodated enough space for the 180 cars that I might be delivering on any given operating day. And of course, we're probably not on every operating day going to ship out 180 cars, but I wanted to have the potential to do so just because it just made sense. You can see for a second there I was still deleting some of the old stuff that I hadn't removed yet. And then we're back over here at the engine fueling facility here, getting that kind of finished up. But kind of here's how I did my math in my yard design. So I figured if I've got 180 car spots and I'm going to assume that a car length is an average of 50 feet, then I took 180 times 50 and I multiplied that by 1.5. And the reason I multiplied by 1.5 was so that I could get about an extra 50% capacity above what I actually needed. If you've ever spoken to railroaders who worked in the yards or whatnot, everybody will tell you that a yard that gets filled up is always bad news. So I wanted to make sure that I had plenty of capacity in my yard so that if there ever was a period of peak demand or high demand, I would have a little bit of capacity to be able to handle that. So I ended up deciding I needed about 13,500 feet of track. And I ended up in this local yard. By the time it's done, it has about 13,000 feet. So I think I did pretty good, honestly. But the way I set it up was 13 tracks, each about 1,000 feet. And once I finished the build here, I realized that I probably put them too close together and I should have left a little more space. But honestly, at this point, I don't know if I'm going to go back and ever fix that. I'm not sure. Reason for that is because now that we're in the town of Kingston, since I originally had not planned for this yard, or this portion of the yard here, the local yard, it's actually taking up space in the town itself. And you can see I've got a couple of streets set up there all the crossings in Kingston are going to have to cross this yard or this yard lead, and I just couldn't have that. So the road here that's closest to the yard, you can't see it right now, but you'll see it again in just a minute. I eventually am going to make that into a bridge. But the other two streets, they're going to have to cross the yard lead, and those people, they're going to be sitting there for a while on some days. I don't know about you guys, but when I operate, I definitely like to operate at a very prototypical speed. Yards, we're not going to be going more than 10. If we have a restricted area, we're going to, follow the 15-mile-an-hour rule, that kind of stuff. Right here, this little short clip, just a quick detour. I had realized after I started building it that I had messed up and didn't follow my design the way I had intended, so I had to go in and try to fix that right quick. I wanted a train to be able to access the through yard and the RD tracks directly from the siding, as well as be able to take the loop track if I needed to do that as well, and I needed that to be able to have the same access. So I had to go back and set that back up. Now back to the local yard, we're going to go here and finish up our yard lead on the south side. So because of the loop track that we have, we're going to have a lead on the north side as well as a lead on the south side, but the way I envision this yard operating is most of the switching in the local yard will be done from the south side, so the side that we're on right now. Once again, you can see those switches are cutting out those ties and it just kills me, but here in a minute I get it fixed up. Honestly, looking back and watching as I build this, I think this is one of the best yards I've ever built. And I've built some interesting yards, but the thing I like about this yard is every part of this yard serves a very definite purpose. And I don't really like building things for the sake of just making them look pretty. I do believe that you should make things look pretty, but I think, at least for me, in my opinion, when it comes to working with trains, I like to try to create things that make sense and that would have some sort of basis in the prototype and some real actual function or purpose. Fortunately, since I already had the tracks laid out, making the north lead here was actually pretty fast and very simple. If you have a hard time seeing, I do like to use the New Century switches. I'm using the Model 51 switches because they have the big yellow hand throws. I just love these New Centuries. You're going to see me use those everywhere on the route. This route doesn't really have any dispatcher thrown switches, so I probably won't be putting any automatic switches in. This here is our access from the main onto the south lead of the local yard. Really the only time you'll ever see that used is when you have a local train that's actually departing the yard heading south to Greenville. Alright, next up here we're going to start working on the local industries in Kingston, and there are 4 local industries in Kingston. Really kind of, I guess 3, but what we have set up here is we're going to have 2 tracks set up for loading and unloading containers. And I know that this is not a full-on intermodal facility, and on the real railroad, the KCS interchanges just south of here in Greenville, they actually have a pretty large intermodal yard just to the west as you approach Dallas, just east of Plano, I guess. I'm not going to model that intermodal yard on this route, so what I have here is, you're going to see me set up in a minute, 2 little spurs that come off, and these are the spurs that we're going to use for loading and unloading containers. And these containers are exclusively for cotton traffic. This area of Texas grows a lot of cotton, and so I decided I wanted to simulate the fact that they put cotton in containers nowadays, and that's how they ship it. And I didn't actually know that until several months ago when I was doing some reading on different industries and whatnot, and I was honestly very surprised to see that. It was very interesting to think that that's actually how they ship cotton. I just assumed that they, baled it up and shipped it in open trucks or whatnot, but obviously I hadn't paid a lot of attention. Right here, we just passed the team track, so we also have a team track, and we have a scrap yard here in Kingston. The scrap yard will send out loaded gondolas, and the team track, of course, is for serving smaller industries, local businesses, that kind of thing. Now, I know that, big Class 1 railroads, they don't really like working with team tracks. They don't like switching moves that require a lot of effort and don't get a lot of business. They really like to run the unit trains from one big industry to another. But, you know, I will remind you that this is a short line. It's only about 140 miles, and so we love team tracks, and you're going to see quite a few of those. Most towns on this route, the way I've set it up, will have some form of a team track, even if it only receives a few types of cars. But I'll have, you know, another video later where I talk about the details of how I intend on operating the layout and whatnot. But for now, you know, we can just kind of enjoy as I work through the yard here. There is one other industry I forgot to talk about, and that is just north of Kingston. There's a small town called Merritt, and on our railroad we have a Y there, and there's going to be a team track up in Merritt as well. But here you can see me kind of just getting the main stuff in order. I'll have another video later where I put in some of the real details and get this place looking really nice. But mostly today I was just working on getting the general idea down, and then eventually you'll see we get some of the scenery going. I do use only PBR textures since it's Trains 2019. I really like PBR textures, and most of the ones that I'm using I actually got off the download station. So if you don't really like the built-in set, I highly encourage you to go find some on the download station. Here pretty soon we're going to start working on the tracks for serving the loco supply tracks for sand and diesel. And the way I kind of set those up is you've got the track itself where we'll set out cars to be unloaded, and then we have a holding track, and then we have a bypass track, and those are all in the foreground right here. Well, now you're not looking at them, but they were in the foreground. Now, of course, we finally get to where we're adding some scenery. I pretty much use exclusively ST-R&M speed trees. The assets you can find off the download station, I think they're lovely. I know that for some of you guys, they're going to eat up your frame rates. For me, it's one of those things. It is what it is. I don't really like a whole lot of other trees, and I love to have these. I mostly use the Yassens. I use some Dubs, and then of course I use the Cusps to get all these bushes and whatnot, as well as some of the it starts with a G. I forget what it's called. I have to look up later, but Grishuga, I think. Man, I'm butchering it. I apologize. Here you're about to see me add a couple of houses. Kingston's a very, very small town. It's not even incorporated as a full-on city. But, you know, add a couple houses, and then after that, I'll put their lots together, and I'll also add in the middle like a derelict lot that's not developed. And in this part of Texas with these really small towns, you see a lot of that, especially on the outskirts of the Dallas Metroplex. There's just a lot of areas that are either not developed or that have been torn down, or places that are being redeveloped. And so here in a minute you'll see me put the lot in that's pretty derelict, and I think it looks pretty nice. If I'm honest with you, houses in Kingston probably don't have privacy fences like that. They probably just have, you know, more simple fences, or maybe even just barbed wire or chain link fences, but I really like those privacy fences, so I figured I'd go for it. And here, like I mentioned, we're just kind of throwing some junk on the ground to create that derelict lot. It doesn't have to be perfect, just want it to be convincing. Besides, it's only ever something you're going to look at in passing anyways, so. I do personally like adding a good amount of detail near the trackside, but I'm one of the first to volunteer to not really care much once you get out of view. The same reason I don't usually have a whole lot of baseboards going any particular direction. I like to drive from inside the cab. Unless I'm working a local, then I like to drive from, you know, right next to the train in the free roam camera and whatnot. So in those cases, there's just not as much you need to see, and I don't mind seeing the edge of the map because I'm mostly focused on what I'm doing right in front of me. Before long, we're going to finish up putting all these bushes and whatnot in, and I did go back later and delete some of these just to kind of trim it down a bit, but I at least wanted to get them in there. You can see me putting some track marks down. I always label my tracks with track marks, and then on the RD tracks, I'm also eventually going to put in track marks on each end of the RD track so that, you know, I can route trains, AI trains, into those tracks. I don't really like to drive trains from point A to point B unless that's the only thing there is to do. If I have a train that needs to do some switching, me personally, I'm pretty much always going to be doing that, and I'll just let the AI take trains from point A to point B. It's just my preference. It doesn't mean that I would never drive one. It just usually, with the way I make routes, I have lots I need to do. So personally, working in the yard is literally one of my favorite things to do. I just love it. And later on, I'm going to make another video where I talk in more detail about how I'm actually intending to operate this route. I have quite a cool system set up, in my opinion. Here, I'm just trying to find some odd ended details just to kind of add to the service track there, the supply track for the sand and the diesel and whatnot. Got a couple of tanks and some sand spillage and whatnot. Back to naming yards again. I will say also, I didn't mention this earlier, but I always name my industries with track marks as well. I personally don't like the interactive industries. They're too limiting in my opinion. They don't allow enough freedom. I'd much rather spend my time in the actual operating session configuring the loads of cars if I need to, because really I don't care honestly what a car is loaded with. I more just care if it's loaded or empty, because I want the train to be weighted properly, but I don't really truly care too much, especially on enclosed cars. If it's supposed to be carrying corn and it's loaded with rice, I don't care. What matters is that it's heavy like it's supposed to be, and that's what makes me happy, me personally. But that's because I just care more about getting cars where they need to be, whether they're empty or loaded, and I don't care so much about getting specific commodities to specific places. If I wanted to do that, then I would go set up the interactive industries. But another reason I don't like those is because I feel like too many cars just aren't built in with enough commodities that they can use, and I just get tired of programming cars, honestly. If you look closely, you can just barely see some Turfex that I have going on here. And so I went and found it again, and now I'm adding the Turfex. I have a really short grass that I'm using right now, right next to the track. It's just short enough that it doesn't stick up over the rails or anything. That way, if I want to put it on the main line, I can. I also have another set of Turfex I made that's a little bit longer grass that I add in the fields over here. You'll see that in just a minute as well. But of course, as I build the route more, I'll get different styles of Turfex and whatnot. But for now, just taking it easy. It's just a start. Literally have built this layout from scratch. But eventually it'll make it to about 140 miles. I figure it might take me a year or two, but I'm definitely looking forward to it, and I hope that you guys will come join in and be a part of the process. So please make sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon so you can be notified when I put new videos out, and don't forget to give me a like, because it really helps out the channel. It's not going to be too much longer before we wrap it up, so I just wanted to say I appreciate you guys tuning in today. Hope you guys have enjoyed it, and whenever we're finally done here, I'll leave you guys with some cinematics from the yard once it's all finished. And thanks for tuning in. I'm going to try my best to put a video out once a week or so we'll see what I can do. But since the cinematics are up, I'll catch you guys later. Appreciate it.